Welcome all. First thing I'd like to say is I just want to have the committee extend our thanks to Bob O'Brien for serving as our interim superintendent for the last several months. Bob came in during a very difficult situation. He's worked hard every day. He's done a great job. I appreciate the work he did. This committee certainly appreciates the work that you've done, Bob. And we know that this is your last meeting and probably have a large smile. But on behalf of the committee, we certainly thank all the great work that you have done. Thank you very much. Also, I'd like to welcome the two new committee members, Mr. Chuck Pollack from District 2 and Mr. Arthur Corsini representing District 3. Congratulations, gentlemen. And I'd also like to welcome back Mr. Marciano, Mrs. Picard, Mr. De Silva, and Mr. Andriozzi. Welcome back. Correspondence. We have no correspondence. Does anyone have correspondence they received? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 4. Public comments on agenda. Does anyone wish to comment on the agenda on items 4 through 15? Approval of executive minutes. The chair will accept a motion to approve the executive minutes of 12/18, 12/21, and 12/18. Motion made.
I think it's 12/12. 12/8, 12/12, and 12/18.
12/18.
And the public was, so I'll make the motion to approve and seal the executive session minutes 12/8, 12/12, and 12/18 pursuant and applicable to Rhode Island Journal Law 42-46-4 and 5.
Any questions on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I make a motion to approve the public session minutes for 12/8, 12/12, 12/18, and 1/16/2019.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The chair will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Questions on the consent agenda?
Yes, I actually have a question on the approval of leave of absence 4.4.
Sure. Proceed.
So there was one leave request for dates that were sporadic, that we typically don't approve. Dates around February vacation. I'm trying to find the page. So it's the 4th name on the list. And the question, it was for dates February 13th through 15th, February 20th through the 22nd during the school year.
So amend the motion with the correction.
So I'd like to amend the motion to approve the first 3 and to reject the 4th.
Okay, so that will require two separate votes. You have the 3 names in front of you in terms of leave of absences. The chair will entertain a motion for the 3 individuals.
Motion made. Frank. The motion should be to pull that item off the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Vote on the consent agenda.
That's what we're going to do now.
Consider that separate.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Is there a motion to approve the 3 individuals, the first 3 individuals on the consent agenda?
Motion made to approve the first 3.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Is there a motion for the fourth individual relative to a leave of absence?
I'll make the motion. No, to accept.
Did you make a motion to grant the leave, Ron?
Making a motion to grant the leave
Okay.
because it has not been rejected at the level ahead of us, or before us at the superintendent's level.
Okay, and also, I'd like to defer this question, to, if I may, to our HR director. Any comment on that?
You're doing that through the chair, Mr. Marciano? Thank you. What's the specific question?
Why it was approved?
I think it may, on the unpaid leave clause and the interpretation of the contract. I'm assuming that when the HR director and the superintendent conversed about that, and they're in compliance with the four walls of the contract, and not having an executive session to talk about it further, I think we should just make a motion. I'm making a motion to continue to approve that.
Sorry, Rod, would you repeat your motion, please?
So I'm saying that because it came here as an approval on a consent item, and I'm assuming that the HR director and the superintendent met, discussed it, and it falls within the four walls of the contract, the teachers negotiated collective bargaining agreement, that it's here to be approved, and so I think it should be approved.
I concur with you.
In the future, when these kinds of things come up, maybe we should have a brief executive session just to hash it all out, so we're all on the same understanding, because it's my understanding this is not the first time that this individual has done this type of a leave without pay. And I'm not sure how the contract exactly addresses that. I know we can grant a year leave without pay, but maybe it's being interpreted as up to a year without pay.
So you made a motion that we approve it, correct? I made a motion to approve. Seconded by myself, I guess.
There's a motion by Mr. De Silva, seconded by Mr. Marciano. Further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
6 yeas, 1 nay. Motion carries. Turn the meeting over to the superintendent.
I have included in your packet a letter that was sent to the Ritchie parents and guardians informing them that their child will have to make up one day at the end of the school year. I do want to remind the committee that we received a waiver for 2 of the 3 days that we had to make up from the beginning of the school year. So they gave us a waiver for 2 days, but not for all 3. This year, kindergarten students will not be registered to a specific school. We will have to wait until after the redistricting is complete before they are assigned to a school. The dates for registrations are March 16th, 2019, from 8:30 to 11, and I believe they're going to split up the alphabet, the beginning of the alphabet on one of those days and the end of the alphabet on the second date, which is March 23rd, 2019, from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. And I just have one final thing that I do want to say. I want to personally thank the committee for giving me this opportunity to serve in North Providence. I want to thank all the administrators for their support, the teachers, everyone in the district has been fantastic. So to walk in and not knowing anyone, I do want to personally thank each and every one of you for the support that you've given to me during my brief stay here. So that concludes my report.
May a discussion?
Mr. Picard?
Just on the notice, it states, and I'm not sure if this is an error or if this is how it's meant to be stated, each school has a designated date for registration listed below. I know that was how it was done previous, but there's only 2 dates. So my guess is that it's not by school, but by last name. So we just have to make the change before it gets sent out. So this is the old one? Okay, just as long as somebody fixed it.
We need discussion and approval of bids, and that would be for the school dentist. We solicited a number of dentists and requested for them to give us a quote to cover the school department, and we only got 1 person that returned the bid. So we are recommending that you approve the school dentist.
So move.
Mr. Frank D'Amato, at a cost of $3,500. Thank you. Motion by Mr. Marciano,
Second?
second by Mrs. Picard. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I recommend that the committee approve the use of property requests. They should be included in your packet.
Motion made.
Second.
Somebody doing it, that's great.
I have a question as well. Oh, I just think there needs to be clarification. I know the PTOs are saying that they're sending in their use of property requests, but they're not all coming to us. I'm not sure if there's just a miscommunication because, for example, if the principal runs an event, we don't need the use of property, but the PTOs run the event, we do. So I just think there needs to be a clarification because I don't see the PTO event that a parent had called me about.
So noted. So we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The new business, I'll turn the new business to Mr. O'Brien.
Okay, it's a discussion approval, restore at the discretion of the superintendent the 2-hour delay of school due to inclement weather. In March, the committee passed a resolution eliminating the 2-hour delay. There are times, especially in the northern part of the state, when an extra hour will allow the school and streets to be cleared and students can safely go to school. The superintendent recommends approval.
Discussion.
Motion first. Motion made to approve the recommendation.
I'll second.
Discussion, please.
Mr. Ignazzi?
So in March, when we put this resolution forth, we were also asking for some data on the amount of children who use the 2 hours for an absentee, for absenteeism, I guess is the proper wording. We were trying to capture the difference between a 1 hour and a 2 hour delay, and no one ever came forth with that information that we asked for in March. Secondly, every hour that the teachers are not in school, it runs us anywhere between $25,000 to $30,000 per hour that they're not in school. And lastly, if the roads are not cleared in an hour, that extra hour to me, I don't believe is going to make a difference. It probably would make a difference in April, late March, when the sun's warmer. In a day like yesterday, it wasn't going to make a difference. So it's either we're in or we're out, and that's always been, you know, my contention. And again, when we did this in March, I thought we asked for some data about absenteeism versus 1 and 2 hour delay. And we haven't received that yet.
Any other discussion?
I have discussion. While I
Go ahead.
completely respect Mr. Andriosi's opinion, and I understand, I don't believe the 2-hour delay should just be used haphazardly, but I do understand why it was put into place. If we all remember the large amount of snow that got dropped on us a few years back, and it was a way for school districts to avoid canceling schools, to not push too late into June. And with many of our schools not having air conditioning, we can have both kinds of conversations, right? It's unsafe, 2 hours delay, the ice, things like that, and then it's hot. It's, you know, the students can't think, they can't learn. So I think I have respect for the superintendent's decision to be able to determine to use that 1 or 2 hour delay or cancel as they see fit. So I'm okay with it, but I completely understand your rationale, Mr. Andriosi, and I believe that I don't think that we would use it in a way that would automatically put a 2 hour delay in.
Any other discussion? Okay, motion by Mr. De Silva, seconded by Mrs. Picard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Discussion approval legal counsel contract with the law firm of Brennan, Recuperal, Cascione, Scungio, and McAllister. Background, Mr. Scungio's firm would represent the school committee as well as special education. The superintendent recommends approval.
Motion made to appoint the law firm for our legal needs.
It's a motion made. Is there a second? Mr. Pollock seconds the motion.
Discussion.
On the motion.
Discussion, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Marciano?
Yeah, any comments that I'm going to make, certainly not to disparage anyone. This is a very unique area of education and, of course, of the law. I was just wondering if the special ed director has been involved in this discussion at all, as far as cases are concerned, where these cases are, and the status of these things. This is serious stuff.
The superintendent to respond, Ms.
Yes, please.
Question.
Yeah, the question is, because of how serious this area of law is and the educational aspect of it, special ed, has the special ed director been involved at all in this as far as the status of cases and, you know, how many cases are pending and all those kinds of things? I know one thing, since I've been on this committee, which is a very long time, I used to get a lot of complaints about special education, but thankfully things are going very well. So I was just wondering if there's been any dialogue at all about pending cases and where they are and all this other stuff, because this is something that I don't think you just flip. And this is not to disparage Mr. Scunzio or the firm or anything like that. They do a very fine job for us, but my concern is cases that are pending and where they are and where they're going.
Well, if the Scungio firm is approved tonight, I'm sure that dialogue will occur. It would not have occurred before this meeting. After the appointment, I'm sure there's going to be discussions of where cases are, what's pending, all of those types of things. But that wouldn't be possible until you make the approval.
No, I understand that. Now, Mr. Scunzio, are you comfortable with this?
Yes.
Okay, and will you be handling these cases yourself?
Well, as necessary, I will, but we also have 2 other attorneys in my office that have extensive experience in special education. One in particular, John Anderson, is probably the preeminent special education attorney in the state of Rhode Island. and Mike Pollock has 15 years of experience in the area.
Okay.
Additionally, the former counsel that did special education work, as you know, I mentored him into being an attorney. So I think our firm is fully capable of handling anything that North Providence could present us.
As I indicate, my remarks are not to disparage anyone, but I have a concern that make sure these cases are handled properly and the transition is a smooth one. That's all I can say.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion and approval of the E-rate consulting contract. I have included a copy of the E-rate consulting contract. The contract includes applying for approximately $22,000 for next year, as well as applying for $270,000 of unused E-rate money from 2015. They have to file forms to return the unused money and then reapply to use the money for the wiring at the 2 new schools. The superintendent recommends approval.
Motion made.
Motion made by Mr. De Silva, seconded by Mr. Andriozzi. Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion approval, rejection of the Edulog bid for redistricting consultant services. The bid came in at $59,580. We do not have the funds in the budget. The superintendent recommends approval, and again, this would be the approval to reject the bid.
So move.
Second.
Discussion?
Mrs. Picard?
While I see that we don't think we have the money, this is a really big undertaking, so I'm hoping that there's a very thoughtful plan in place. I've been doing a lot of research on redistricting, and in 2017 in North Carolina, they were sued because they lacked transparency. They attempted to hold meetings that were not a part of the open meetings law, and they did not include enough members of the community to ensure that students were attending school closest to their homes, as proximity was the #1 thing parents stated was the most important to being involved in their community school. So we clearly have going to 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools. We used to have 3 elementary schools go to Birchwood, 3 go to Ritchie. It has to be very thoughtfully planned out to ensure that parents are clear not only about what elementary school their child's going to attend, but what middle school their child's going to attend. They have to, there has to be a clear rationale, because I know as a parent, I'm hearing a lot of chatter about, when will you know, how will you know? There's already a lot of angst because Maryville is closing, so they all know that their kids are going someplace. And while I know people are quick to think about making sure we keep all Maryville together, we can't do that and think about completely shifting out Wayland, or completely shifting out Stephen Only, or completely shifting out a McGuire. It has to be really more thoughtful than that. I don't think the expertise is necessarily available with just community members. I think a consultant is the best way to go, so I'm concerned that we don't think we have the funds to be able to do something, because in the end, it's gonna fall to us for those decisions, and this is a make or break kind of decision for a district. Later on in the agenda I have residency on. I also know that we have a lot of residency concerns. We're gonna have to think through special permissions. We're gonna have to send letters to those parents. We have to have a rationale about who's leaving what school, rationale who's by last name, first in, first out. These are a lot of decisions, and currently, I would think the best way to do that is have a consultant. I think we've seen success. While I know $59,000 seems like a big price tag, I also know that this is going to look like a biased decision. You don't want politics to play into it. You want to make sure parents have a thoughtful rationale of what was put into place. And I would hate for us to say we don't have the money, because this is a really important decision. So I'm concerned about not doing this and not having a thoughtful plan in place of why we're not doing this.
Well, as the superintendent indicated, first of all, there's $60,000 is not in the budget, and I'm not about to approve something that's not in the budget. I think secondly, we did not get a lot of bidders because we asked them that the middle of March would be the timeline, and they could not meet that timeline because the intention is to notify parents from the middle of March through April, and then take any appeals during the month of April. So hearing that from the superintendent, and only having one bidder, and that one bidder not being able to meet the timelines that were established and not having the $60,000, I've put together a committee of the following people to look at the redistricting and have that redistricting plan completed by the middle of March. As you know, you already mentioned, Mrs. Picard, with the closing of Maryville. Not only do we have to reassign students, but staff also has to be considered in terms of. So I've appointed the following people. I've sent letters out to the following people to get this process underway because it's going to take time, and we want to make sure that the community is notified in time. Mr. Goho, Mr. Seitsinger, the Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Jones, the Special Ed Director, Mr. Ferroli, Director of Buildings, Mr. Wenscott, the Town Planner, Mr. Nahejian, the Tech Director, Mr. Cicerone, the AFT Union President, Janine Napolitano, Bruce Butler, and Linda Murphy, 4 principals, Charlene Smith, the Maryville PTO, Linda Murphy, the principal at Wayland, Terry English and Francisco Montero from the bus company. And I've asked Mr. De Silva to chair that because with the closing in Maryville, he probably knows that district better than anyone else. I've asked him to set up an appeals committee from the number of people I just mentioned. I've also asked him to have this completed by the middle of March. I'm not placing any other school committee people on that committee because I don't want any one of us outside of Mr. De Silva who may be compromised. If appeals do come to the school committee and you're sitting on that committee, you're going to be compromised if any parents come before us and there's a vote taken. So 2 dates have been set up for the meeting of these individuals. Wednesday, January 30th, and Wednesday, February 6th. And the completion timeline is the second week in March. We're doing the best that we can with this situation. It's a difficult situation. I do not disagree with you in terms of having an outside consultant come in, but it really doesn't allow us to make that happen for 2 major reasons: the budget and meeting the timeline. And the people I've mentioned probably know the district better than anybody else in terms of making decisions. Certainly any school committee people could come before this committee and provide advice to them. They'll take every individual's input into consideration. The process will begin, and hopefully we can have a very fluid process with the least disruption as possible. To the best of my knowledge, the only thing that was promised to the Maryville parents that they would not be bused across town to Greystone. Outside of that, we hope to come up with the best redistricting plan that we can that will satisfy not only the students but their parents.
Frank, why aren't all the members of the, a member from every PTO president is part of our parent advisory group on the committee? Why just a couple? Or was there one? How many were on?
One. The president of
staff
Maryville,
except
well,
for
because Maryville is closing.
But I think this is going to impact every single school. Why wouldn't we at minimum have a parent from every school have a voice at that table?
We can do that. Do that if you want to recommend. I have no problem accepting that.
I would like to recommend that. I think that would help.
PTO presidents of each school,
Thank you.
so ordered. There was a motion by Mr. De Silva and seconded by Mr. Pollock. Any further discussion on the redistricting committee? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We'll add the PTO presidents from the remaining schools. Thank you. Second issue relative to redistricting is to accept the superintendent's recommendation to reject the $60,000 bid. Motion made by Mr. Andriozzi, seconded by Mr. Marciano. Any questions on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion and approval of the removal of textbooks from Greystone Elementary School. Including in your packet are the list of textbooks that are no longer used and are outdated. They have no monetary value. The superintendent recommends approval.
Motion by Mr. Marciano, seconded by Mr. Andriozzi. Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion of service animals in school policy. This would be a first reading. This policy was reviewed by Andrew Hennessy and Chris Jones.
Any questions relative to the first reading? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item.
Discussion approval of North Providence High School yearbook publishing recommendation.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mr. Marciano. Questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion approval elimination of early termination clause in the administrator's contract.
So moved?
Discussion.
Yeah.
Motion on the floor by Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mr. De Silva. Discussion, Mr. Andriozzi.
First, rightfully or wrongfully, my name has been attached to this clause from the beginning. And I'd like to say that it's not an early termination clause, it's actually an ethical clause. Okay, all we're asking is that we give that the administrators give us proper warning prior to them leaving. Just this past August, we had a principal leave. We had to fill that vacancy. We've had other administrators leave prior to school opening with short notice. I think there has to be something in place to give us some leg up, some warning. There has to be something in place. If we allow, administrators to just leave on a whim within weeks of school opening, we're going to end up in chaos. We ended up in chaos this past summer. Basically, we had someone leave. They didn't choose to leave, but we terminated someone, and then we had somebody who left, the finance director, and then all of a sudden we're in turmoil. This, we can only take so much of this. We need to have something in place to protect the district somewhere, somehow. And again, I don't know why it's called an early termination clause. It's more of an ethical clause. There should be some ethics involved with how people come and go from our district.
Further discussion, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Marciano?
Yeah, I understand where Mr. Andriozzi is coming from. We have wonderful administrators in this district. We're very fortunate. Our principals and other administrators do a wonderful job for us. I think the purpose of trying to have people keep their commitment is to, I call it job hopping. You come in, you sign a contract, you get a better offer, and you're gone. you know, that's not fair to the kids, the district, or anybody. So maybe Mr. Scunzio can put some language together or something where we protect ourselves somewhat from someone just coming in, taking the job, the school's ready to start, and then they leave. I think that's the function of it. We're very fortunate. We have some wonderful administrators here, and we don't want to lose people. And we don't, I call it job hopping, and that's not fair to the kids, the district, or anybody. That's all I have to say about it.
If I'm not mistaken, my first read of that was that there's a lot of punitive language in that paragraph where there's something along the lines of a 10% penalty of one's salary. To me, that's punitive. The language as it's currently written is not deserving of the administrators that work for us. I have no problem if language was revisited and 2 weeks' notice was put in there, just like any other job, public or private. I fully understand what Mr. Andriozzi and Mr. Marciano are saying, but I don't think we can have our administrators under the gun thinking that they can apply someplace else. And even though it might be the good intent of this committee, with the current language, you could get a committee that could be very vindictive and abide by that language and be very hurtful, the way the current language is. So I would suggest that the motion is made to eliminate the current language, and I certainly would be open to something along the lines of a 2-week notice.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that Mr. Scunzio come before us or present to us something that's a little more palatable, I guess, and because the entire purpose of this, obviously, is we don't want to lose people, and in order to keep people, obviously, you have to make it appealing and whatever. And this, our administrators are fine. We have a wonderful group here, and this is not something that, obviously, that I think is a great idea, and to punish people. But on the other hand, you know, we have to protect the district somehow. So maybe Ben can come up with some kind of language that everybody can agree on. I'm going to put that in the form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Well, there's already a motion on the floor to eliminate the current language.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion on the current motion to eliminate the current language?
Yes.
Mr. Andriozzi.
So we're going to eliminate the language out of everyone's contract that currently has it in their contract, correct? Is that what we're doing? We're going to eliminate it, and then we're going to revisit it with something more palatable that says 2 weeks. And if I may ask, where's the teeth? So if someone came to you and you know, one day before they decided to leave, we had a principal leave a middle school at the drop of a hat. He just up and left. You know, so where's the consequences? Where's our protection? Where's the district's protection? We give them a 3-year contract. Everyone came in. They were pleased with their contracts. They all were willing to sign what is being termed the termination clause, which I don't like that term. Everyone was, you know, they were willing to sign it. I'm just concerned as to if you eliminate it, what do you put in its place to stop people from exiting? And again, I agree with Mr. Marciano. We have great administrators here, but we can't afford to have, if there is one that should walk out the door, it just sends, you know, especially now with the new schools coming online, it can just send this whole district into a tailspin for no reason.
Any other questions on the motion? Any other discussion on the motion? Everybody understand the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Discussion and
Do you
approval.
have another motion, Mr. Marciano, relative to that issue?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Scunzio put some language into the contracts to protect the district somewhat. Something that's palatable, reasonable, and whatever, reasonable for the district and reasonable for the administrator. And maybe come back to us with something. I need a second.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second, Mr. Andriozzi. Any questions on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The chair will take a roll call vote. Mr. Pollack? Mr. Marciano? Ms. Picard? Mr. De Silva? Mr. Corsini? Mr. Andriozzi? Nay. Motion does not carry.
Discussion and approval of amendment number 2 to the North Providence Memorandum of Agreement for School Construction. This amendment is to our school construction agreement with RIDE would allow state reimbursement of the cost of the owner's program manager. The reimbursement would be $1,775,409. The superintendent recommends approval.
Motion made.
Motion made by Mr. De Silva. Second by Mrs. Picard. Questions on the motion? Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, the memorandum of agreement, the original memorandum of agreement is signed by the superintendent of schools. This is an amendment to that. You know, the school construction, the reimbursement, that is state aid that comes to the school district. But actually, in this case, because it's a bond, it goes to the town. But they required the OPM, which is the program manager. That's Collier's that the town actually hired, but that's required. But this amendment, the memorandum of agreement, is signed by the superintendent. I just wanted approval from the committee for me to sign that, to give authorization to say that we are applying for that.
What was the date on that, Bob? That memorandum of agreement?
It's in there.
That goes back,
Yeah, I've got to submit that back to RIDE. That goes to Joe DeSilva.
initial date of that memorandum of agreement might have been a year ago, 2 years ago?
I'm not
No.
sure when.
We'll check the date on that. It might have preceded the building committee.
It did.
Will do.
Discussion and approval of disability insurance for the superintendent.
So moved.
It was a motion by Mr. De Silva, second, Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mr. De Silva. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to go back to the recommendation of the superintendent regarding the $1.7 million in the memorandum of agreement. Mr. De Silva originally made the motion, and Mrs. Picard seconded that motion. Do you want to put an amendment in there that that information would be forwarded to the building committee?
I'll amend that motion. I'll also point out that this communication we have in front of us refers to the LEA, and we are the LEA, so that's probably why we're voting on it, but it should definitely go to the Building and Facilities Committee.
Second that, Mrs. Picard.
I second.
Any questions on that motion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion approval of reorganization of the finance department. In order to ensure efficiency, adequate staffing, and appropriate oversight within the finance department, we would like to reorganize the business department. We are looking to eliminate or reduce the accounts payable and add a financial supervisor. Ron Gonzalez, our business manager, will do a presentation on our proposal for the reorganization of the business department. The superintendent recommends approval, so I'll turn it over to Ron to...
Hello, everyone. Right before this meeting, I passed.
Ron, I'm sorry, do you mind, because of the video, we're live feed, you're live on camera, do you mind moving to the podium? So all our viewers at home, all 23 of them, can see you.
Is that many?
There's a lot. We have some frequent flyers out there that enjoy seeing us every month.
Good evening. Right before the meeting started, I passed out a few slides I prepared as backup documentation, and there's a few statements I'd like to make regarding this reorganization. Slide 1 is self-explanatory. It's the mission statement. Slides 2 through 5 provide the basis of the background and research that's used as the definitive standard against which organizations measure their effectiveness of the system of internal controls. It's my recommendation that the school committee approve the reorganization outlined in slide 6 in consideration with the plan and discussions on slides 7 and 8. This reorganization is revenue neutral. This plan will reallocate current resources and add expertise of an accountant to ensure that sound financial management team is adequately staffed. This organization allows the finance department the ability to strengthen our segregation of duties and cross-training among our different functions in the event of unforeseen circumstances. That's all.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mr. De Silva. Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Discussion approval of appointments. Rosalind Thorpe, long-term sub, guidance, North Providence High School. Michelle Lewandowski, Science Olympiad coach at Birchwood. Not Italian.
Motion made for those appointments.
Second.
Motion by Mr. De Silva, seconded by Mrs. Picard. Any questions?
You already did, I think, yeah. You all set?
Questions on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, and that leaves me with discussion of residency. So I do think we need a review of our current procedures. Now, my understanding is Mr. Scungio gave an excellent presentation today. It was riveting. That was all the town could talk about.
Today?
I think, was it today or this week, Ben? It was today, see? My sources are pretty good. But what I want to discuss is more about there are a number of our families who are receiving these letters that say that their child needs to prove residency. But because of the number of students that we're inquiring about, there's lack of a follow-up due to the sheer number of them. And while our truancy officer is excellent, I think that between the truancy and the residency, we are unable to keep up with the level of need that we have to ensure that the students who are in our schools live in the district. And while we have two new buildings getting ready to open, and we're redistricting, I think, and we have students scattering about, I think it's important that we as a committee, because we've always had a very good focus on residency, but we have to ensure that we have the proper protocols and then supports behind it to make sure that we are educating the youth of North Providence and not of every other town. So I would like to make a motion to have either Dr. Pilata or the superintendent and who he deems necessary to meet with Tom, discuss the current caseload, how many of students are on that caseload, how many follow-ups need to happen, and just so we can get a hold of what we're looking at to see if if Mr. Massey believes that we have enough supports to be able to handle it, or if we need to look at providing additional resources for that need.
There's a motion by Mrs. Picard, seconded by Mr. Pollock. Does anyone have any questions on the motion? Mayor? Thank you very much. I appreciate that support, Mayor. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. School committee reports. The chairman will report out the individuals serving on the following committees. Personnel Subcommittee, Mr. De Silva will chair with Mr. Marciano and Mr. Corsini. The Building Committee will be chaired by Mr. Pollock, Mr. Andriozzi, and Mr. De Silva. Health and Wellness Subcommittee will be chaired by Mrs. Picard, Mr. Andriozzi, and Mr. Marciano. And the Negotiation Subcommittee with the teachers, which will begin shortly, will be chaired by Mr. Corsini, Mrs. Picard, and Mr. Pollock. We have no requests to address the committee. We have no pending business. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. De Silva, seconded by Mrs. Picard. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.